talk about your life story, family, studies, and who were the important people for you in your private life, in your professional life?
Mm-hmm. It's a big question. So
Yeah,
I'll try to
your
sort of,
life.
yeah, and then right, and then you can, also ask me other questions if I'm not really answering it. So I was, I was born in Korea, and I lived there until the end of maybe age 12, 13-ish. I grew up with my parents and three other siblings. So I'm the youngest out of four. So I think, I was always a bit maybe protected because I'm the youngest. And but because I was also the youngest, I was given a lot of freedom, just to explore and just think critically and freely. And so I was very active in schools. So and it's not always, I can't really think back on my childhood in Korea, and it's not always positive just because in I don't know now, but I think in Korean society, what men are, there's a lot of social drinking. There's also a lot of work related, alcoholism, and that's very accepted, very permissible, very acceptable, even encouraged. So my father did heavily drink. So that had a lot of negative impact on family life, right? He was like great man, very intelligent, smart, but then I think he just drank a lot just because he just wasn't happy with his own life. I actually think he was depressed, but I didn't know that. I can only look back and kind of give that kind of diagnosis, but at that time I didn't know, and so it was really, it was hard, it was difficult. That's what I remember. Although I was protected and sheltered in some ways, but I also saw that, and that was really difficult. Um, and then, so my sister, because I'm the youngest, I have one sister and two older brothers. So I think early on, my older sister had a very positive influence on me, and my mom. And I think whatever happened, I grew up, learning or thinking or believing that um, our immediate physical environment um, is not everything. Like, so I shouldn't feel limited by what's happening in my family or in the physical space. So the only way that I can expand my mind is through reading. So I remember my mom and my sister always buying me books, always giving books as a gift. When I wake up, there will be just another book under my pillow, or like it was always kind of fostered in that way. So I think that was very, very basic, but very loving and caring influence. So it was through books to, for me. I think they might not have intentionally thought of it that way, but I think they were encouraging, in their own ways to really experience something bigger, through reading other people's lives, or through reading about other stuff. So when I was around about to turn 13, that's when we immigrated. Our family immigrated to San Francisco, and my oldest brother stayed behind in Korea because he was a college student back then. And he was also, student activist in Korea. So in 80s and 90s, in South Korea, it was, democratic student movement was very, very active, very, very violent. And because it was not a democratic society, so a lot of college students were angry. They protested heavily, and he was one of the leaders. And so he couldn't just easily leave the country. I'm only saying that because that's gonna have some influence, some impact on my life a little later. So I grew up seeing that, seeing his activism. And so fast forward a little bit. So here in San Francisco, so I went to like 1 year of middle school, and then I went to high school. And let's see, I did well academically, but I never felt that I belonged here. I belonged in the culture that I was in, because I was so young. Language was not a problem. I quickly became, that wasn't a problem. But then somehow, never learned about how to adapt to another culture. My parents, everyone in my family, they were all busy adapting on their own, in their own ways. So I was kind of left alone, and just trusting that I think we were just all busy. Like we all had to adapt and survive, right? So I think it was really hard for me because I was very sensitive, and I was always, I enjoyed observing other people's lives and relationships, and it just was very, there was a cultural shock, and but I didn't know how to understand it. I didn't know how to have certain perspectives. So there was a lot of racism, but I didn't know how to call that, right? So high school was not an easy experience, because it wasn't something that I don't think I ever talk about that experience with anyone. I mean, I had a lot of friends, but we didn't talk about it either. We talked about adolescent stuff, but we didn't really talk about what we were going through, like among other Asian Americans, right? Um, so that was hard, but I think I must have been thinking about something, because what I remember clearly is when it was about the time to apply for college, I knew that I'm just gonna apply to, obviously I wanted to go to good school, but it wasn't like I have to, get into good school by applying to 5 to 10 schools, which is very, very standard. I applied only to one school. So I was betting with my life. So I was like, I'm just gonna apply to one. If I get in, I go there. If I don't get in, then I'm gonna go back to Korea and I'm gonna involve in student activism. So there was something in me, like justice was very important. And that was always part of what I did, even when I was in school. I think even when I was in elementary school or high school, when something bothered me, when something was not right, I would do in my own ways. I would express that somehow. So justice always mattered. And I think I got that from my father, my brother, and what I've read, right? So so I didn't worry about not getting into that school that I applied, because I had a plan. I'm gonna go back to Korea and I'm gonna do that. But fortunately, or maybe fortunately, unfortunately, looking back, yes, fortunately now I got in. So I went to Berkeley here, in Berkeley, California, and I spent a little longer than 4 years. So it wasn't just 4 years, right? So I had to spend maybe 6.5 years to graduate from college, because again, although I got in, graduating from college or getting that degree was not important to me. So I think looking back, I also think that maybe I was a little depressed, and because I was really trying to find the purpose. I was trying to find meaning in life, and I couldn't. I was not suicidal or anything like that, but I think I was very pessimistic. I was very pessimistic. And so then in that young mind, I was thinking that, I remember thinking that if there's not a lot of meaning around me in life or in this world, I might as well do something that is good for the society. So so I got really involved in student activism at Berkeley. Berkeley was known for very progressive school. So in the US, they got really heavily involved in civil rights movement. It's a very progressive school. So then even Korean American students that were there were super progressive and radical. So I got involved with them, and we started, we established Korean like cultural center in a nearby city, like 20 minutes away, because it was a little cheaper. So we rented a building. We learned ourselves how to play Korean cultural instruments, using that as a way to recruit people, teaching people Korean history, letting people know about what's really happening in Korean society in South Korea. And we felt that at that time, so they were also, they were older than me. They were all like juniors and seniors. So they were also influenced my thinking, my behavior. And we just positioned ourselves in a sense that, because we are here, we are not going to be oppressed or sent to jail because you are here, so that we have a bigger voice, free to express our opinions. So we just thought that we have a bigger role to play because we're not in Korea. So I think we felt like there was a purpose to that, right? So I was heavily involved, didn't care about going to classes. So it was really hard. So there was a purpose and meaning. So it was very meaningful years that I spent, but then I still struggled internally. So I think it's more about, even in that student activism, I saw something, there was a sexism in there. There was something else that I didn't see that was, that I was really looking for. I don't think I knew what I was looking for, but what I know is that, wow, wherever I go, yes, I can create a meaning. There's a purpose, but there's also always something that are not right, or that are something that I'm against, or something that reflect what I don't like in the society is always happening in the small groups, small clubs, or wherever I belong to. So I was really heartbroken that that is what's gonna really happen, right? Wherever I went. So the college, so anyways, so I was heavily involved, in that group. So there was actually some years that I was not allowed to go to Korea. I was blacklisted and prohibited to go to South Korea for many years. I didn't care about that at that time. So so then I graduated, and then I worked at a youth program, as a youth program coordinator in San Francisco. And then another group of people that I was really close to and I was really positively influenced emerged. So it was a group of maybe second generation Korean American women. It was only Korean American women, maybe 20 of us. So I'm considered more like 1.5 generation, and they were mostly 1.5 and second generation Korean American women. We all got together. So this is in my early 20s, mid 20s. We got together and we wanted to do something to increase Korean communities' awareness of domestic violence, because domestic violence is something that I witnessed growing up. And unfortunately, a lot of Korean Americans grew up witnessing domestic violence because it is it's not encouraged at all, but I think it is somewhat accepted, or because of shame, or because of prevalence, people do not talk about that outside of home. So it was happening, left and right. And so we all knew about it and we wanted to do something about it. So we created an organization to really address that in the community. So that's what we did for over 10 years. So it's still going on. I'm not part of that group anymore, but that group of women, there was a lot of mutual positive influence, and there was some mentorship there, and I still keep the friendship with them. So that was a really significant woman, group of women who really influenced me. Maybe I can kind of stop there. Is it because I know there are other questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very interesting. The next question will be that when did you encounter the contextual approach and how did it affect you?
So I got my master's in psychology and I got licensed as a marriage and family therapist here quite a long time ago, actually, really long time ago. And then I worked as a as a therapist, as a clinical supervisor, as a clinical director, regional director at many different agencies. And then so I have a family, I have a daughter. And so about 4, maybe 3.5 years ago, I always wanted to, so because I didn't really spend college years really studying, although I was a very studious person, I didn't really study much, because it was not my focus. I was not interested in it, right? But then because of that, that need or that desire, I always had it in me that I always wanted to get involved in a little bit of research, but really getting into doctoral program and just getting that getting that degree for myself. So then 3.5 years ago, or 4 years ago, I decided I'm gonna go back to school and just get a doctoral degree, right? So that's how I met Tatiana about 4 years ago, and I never heard of contextual therapy until I met Tatiana. So she was mentioning that in a quantitative research class. But because I've been working in this field for a long time, I was surprised. I never heard of contextual therapy. So I inquired more about it. And then I read more about it. And then in another class, contextual therapy was introduced as a part of a few other family systems theories. So when I read about it, first it was very intriguing. And then the more I read about it, it just made a lot of sense. And I just thought it was very integrative and beautiful therapy. Beautiful theory in some ways, right? So it was more, I thought it brought together the relationship emphasis along with contextual emphasis, right? Because we cannot see individual life, but also each relationship outside of any context, right? So I thought it just laid out that foundational, maybe the principles really well, right? In a way that made it easier to kind of conceptualize what I see in my life or in my client's life. And so I really appreciated that. I really appreciated that there was a relational ethics that was really emphasized, which I never heard of that before, or in other theories. And I think that really matters. It doesn't matter what theory people use, but I think relational ethics does play a role. And if we don't understand it, then it's gonna come out in different ways, and not really addressing it either. Because if you don't understand it that way, then you're gonna just treat individuals' depression and anxiety and low self-esteem without talking about anything else, when it could be actually coming from that relational ethics that was never healed, right? So I think in that regard, so I think it was more I got interested in that.
And did it affect you also, like in your personal life when
So then, because I got interested in it, so I think when I get interested in something, I really get interested in something, like the way I got involved in student activism. And there was, after I became a therapist, I was heavily influenced by narrative therapy. So for narrative therapy, David Epstein and Michael White, I went to their workshops. I went to Canada to get to take their training or workshops. And so I was very influenced by narrative therapy, which I still do use. So when I got very interested in contextual, I it's not more like it's not like an intentional decision, but I was always thinking about from that framework, or when there's opportunity to write papers, I would always choose to use contextual therapy to do that. For my doctoral exam, I chose contextual therapy to present and also do a case presentation from that perspective. For my dissertation, I chose contextual therapy, right, to analyze or to really look at my qualitative research through that lens. So, it did influence me in that regard. And because I had to write doctoral exam and dissertation papers using contextual therapy, I included a lot of my own life reflection from that contextual therapy as well. So I had a very also personal and professional time, maybe at least a couple of years, just thinking about contextual therapy, and I actually wrote about it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Please talk about the topic of representation.
So really briefly, it was dissertation was on qualitative research. It was a phenomenological study where I interviewed 8 young Asian American adults living in Sacramento. And I was just interviewing them through Zoom one by one, just asking questions about their early experience of having been parentified. So my subject is on parentification. So I only chose those participants who said yes, I was parentified. So I chose those participants and had interviews. So I'll be talking about young Asian American adults' experience of having been parentified when they were growing up. And I'll be talking about that from contextual therapy and therapy lens, and then I'll be adding a little bit of acculturation and cultural perspective on top of that.
Thank you. Do you have a personal family involvement in the topic? You spoke a lot about your family experiences and you shared your personal life very openly. Could you add something, or is there any?
I think really, really briefly, I think I immediately saw that, when I learned about contextual therapy, my mind immediately went to, oh, that's what I saw. Because I think my older sister was heavily parentified, not because she was older, but she was actually the second oldest, but because she was a girl, there was also gender expectations. So she was actually the only one who was so parentified, both instrumental wise and also emotionally parentified. And so I was kind of always, I wrote about that a lot in my dissertation. And then the part about, me feeling left alone, it was not a neglect, but it almost felt like that to me when I was actually growing up. I didn't use the word neglect because it wasn't. They had I received a lot of protection and love in their own ways. But if I have to choose a word to describe my experience, it was closer to feeling like having the emotional neglect while growing up. So then it can be maybe another form of parentification, because I had to take care of my own needs, which I don't think is really fair as a young child. So I think that was maybe another form of parentification. So it was really my sister and myself that I was kind of thinking about that. And then little later, toward the end of my dissertation, I did also realize that maybe my father also might have been parentified when he was growing up. So I think there was that generational experience as well. So that will be my family involvement when it comes to contextual therapy.
What motivates you to attend that conference? And And how would you encourage others to come to the conference?
So I really do love contextual therapy. So when I heard about the conference, I think it was a couple of years ago, from Tatiana, I got really excited.
Mm-hmm.
So I just told her I really want to go. So it was not about making a presentation at all. I told her I just want to go and attend the conference. And then I never been to that part of Europe. So that was another, that's great. That's a part that I also want to go to anyway. So I can do both. I can attend the conference and I can also travel a little bit, right? So that was the motivation initially, but then now that I'm done with my dissertation, I defended my dissertation. It got approved in May, and I'm completely done with the program now. This month, I am done. So now that it's done, I was also thinking that how great it would be if I can share my study and what I found, and it was because it's very, I was very moved by my participants in the study. So I would love to share that and learn from others who have been, studying or using or trying to advance contextual therapy. So that will be my motivation.
I hope we will meet there.
And thank you very much you were so open about your personal life in this person. It's very interesting to